Alright, so today we're working on the Raptor and we are installing camber bolts. This is going to be in the front of the vehicle and they adjust the camber on the lower control arm of the front axle. So most vehicles come with this from the factory. They'll have some sort of camber adjusting either bolt or washers, which can be rotated into the correct position for your alignment and then tightened down into place. Ford doesn't do that for some reason. From the factory, they just come with these slots. You have to loosen the bolts and then kind of hit the lower control arm until it moves into the correct position. So installing these will help ensure that you get set into a correct alignment position and that you maintain that position on the vehicle. So I've done several videos where I have to lift the front of the vehicle. Thank goodness that it is just the front of the vehicle for this. You'll need to lift it up, make sure that the vehicle has the parking brake turned on, that the back of the vehicle is secured with shock blocks. Before you actually lift it up, make sure that you loosen the lug nuts on the front tire that you're about to lift up and use some jack stands to hold the vehicle up. Don't just use a jack. If you're wondering what type of jack I'm using a Harbor Freight 2-ton aluminum jack with a Pro Eagle adapter plate and height extension. If you're wondering why Keiko's there, she just had some surgery whenever I did this and she wanted to come out and rough wrench with me. Whenever you get the tire off, go ahead and throw it underneath the vehicle. Make sure that the rim is directly underneath the frame. That way, if you have an accident and the vehicle falls for some reason, the frame will land directly on the wheel. And yes, you'll ruin the wheel, but hopefully you'll save your life. After you get the wheels off, go ahead and remove all of the plates underneath the vehicle. It's going to be the front skid plate, the engine skid plate, and then also the transmission skid plate. All three need to come off. All of these skid plate bolts are either 13 or 15 millimeter. So just make sure that if you're using an impact wrench, you have both of those sizes in deep socket. I'll leave a link in the description for the specific parts that I purchased, but these are from SPC Performance. I bought them at 4-Wheel Parts. I actually ordered them online and then just picked them up at a local store in Tacoma. So the socket sizes that you're looking for here are going to be 21 millimeter for the bolt and 27 millimeter for the nut that goes on the front and back of the control arm. So I wanted to get as close as possible to the same location after I did this. So I tried to mark it using a marker just to make sure that I could center the bolt back where it used to be based on the previous alignment. You can see that while I'm loosening it, I do have the jack there to take off a little bit of weight and pressure off of the lower control arm and hopefully pull out that bolt very easily. So the kit comes with this template, but the template doesn't match up exactly with the slot that's already existing, nor does it line up exactly with the hole that already exists there on the front and back of the undercarriage there. So I had to basically try and figure out what I was going to use to mark and identify the locations of where I needed to drill the additional holes, and just double check everything. I ended up using both visual, using the template, and also using some calipers just to verify and remeasure everything a few times before I started drilling. I've got to be honest, I'm pretty bad with using punches and hammers to try and mark those drill locations. I did this several times. I needed to make sure that there was a good enough dent that I could actually start the drill bit without worrying that it'll run off of course. I couldn't actually start drilling until I completely unbolted the lower control arm, and that's because it would just have been in the way. I would have either hit the control arm itself or hit the bushing, so I did have to remove this rear bolt in order to actually start drilling in the vicinity of the front bolt. Once I pulled the lower control arm out of the way, I could go ahead and start drilling. I used a cobalt step drill bit and just cut it as small as possible and kept checking to make sure that fitment was appropriate for the slot. Here you see me triple checking all of the measurements just to make sure I have the correct location before I go crazy hammering with the punch, trying to make a dent that I can start the drill bit on. So the front and back of the subframe already have holes in them. You only have to drill the 2 holes on the inside of the lower control arm. Otherwise, there's already holes there for the little brackets for the slot. If you're wondering which bolt to use, there are 2 different size bolts. One of them is going to be longer than the other one. The long one goes in the front, but both of them go from the inside to out. So you will be inserting the bolt from the inside of the lower control arm and going outward. The nuts should be on the outside. You do need to make sure that the washers line up appropriately, and from what I understand, you do need to have the washers pointed upward in order to get the maximum amount of adjustment. If you're wondering why I'm looking goofy here, it's because I had to go get a different wrench. Whenever you install this new set, it's actually 27 millimeter on both sides. So both the bolt and the nut are 27 millimeter on the camber bolts. Tightening these down was actually kind of a pain in the ass to begin with. I couldn't use the impact wrench the entire time, so I ended up using a ratchet to tighten everything down. which was terrible, but it kind of had to be done. And this is just to get it nice and snug before actually torquing it. After you've adjusted everything to the correct position, you can go ahead and grab your torque wrench and set it to 198 foot-pounds and torque it down. Now that I was done with the driver's side, just had to do the exact same thing over on the passenger side. So after you get everything done on the passenger side, it's time to put it all back together. That means reinstalling all of the skid plates and getting the wheels and tires back on. After you do that, make sure you get it to your local alignment shop that you trust as quickly as possible. I actually wasn't sure when I was even going to be able to get this job done, so I didn't schedule that in advance, and I ended up having to wait 2 weeks. So I was driving on the vehicle with messed up alignment, which I'll show you here in a minute. So here is that alignment I was talking about. This is actually 2 separate alignments at the same shop. They had different equipment each of the times, so that's why they look different. The top was after I installed my eye-box springs as well as the leaf springs in the back. I went ahead and had aligned. The bottom is after I did the camber bolts, and you can tell that they were a lot more off after the camber bolts, and that's just because I didn't get it exactly right whenever I torqued it down myself. Not a huge difference here. You can tell the main thing is that they were a little more precise after the camber bolts, just because they could be. That's the whole point. And hopefully they stay accurate for a longer period of time than they would have, just with the slots and the bolts from before. I will mention that the camber bolts that I purchased, they do have a range that's specified on the website. This is going to differ based on, number one, making sure that you actually drilled the hole in the correct position, and then number two, the slot is actually wider on the brackets that come with the kit. So in order to get that full adjustment, you would need to cut into that portion of the frame in order to build out that full range of adjustment, if you're willing to do that. I was not. I just didn't mess with it, and I wanted to kind of get them installed quickly, but it's something to look at in the future if I actually have issues getting full adjustment on the lower control arms. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully this helped if you're planning on doing this yourself. And thanks for watching, and hope to see you next time.